the screen. Hopefully you're able to see that. We've got a little bit of a shore and a little bit of earth at the bottom, a little bit of grasses. Hopefully you're able to see that. So what will we need today? We will need a blow dryer. Well, actually, we don't necessarily need a blow dryer. We're going to try and do it without. I do have mine handy. So if you have a blow dryer handy, great, but it may not be necessary. Paper towel, you'll want paper towel. Your masking fluid, if you've got masking fluid, maybe you've got yours in a tube that just squeezes out. If you don't, if you're going to use a brush, then dip the end of your brush in soap first. Or I'm going to use a Q-tip, or not a Q-tip, I'm going to use a toothpick. So hopefully you can see that. It's disappearing. And if you don't have any of those things, you could use a wax crayon for a paint resist, or you could use masking tape. So I've just taped off where I think the waves would be. So I'll paint this one as well as this one, so we can see what's the difference between masking fluid and the tape. As I said, wax would do. The difference of wax is you won't be able to paint over the wax. So it tends to stick, and you can't, it will resist paint forever. So tape, if you don't have paint resist of some kind, then try tape and just tape on. And I just took a piece of tape and just ripped off little edges, and I'm just pressing them firmly into the paper. And then I'll take those off afterwards. So I'll paint both while we're doing this, and then we'll be able to see the difference between one and the other. So you didn't need to prepare your canvas or paper in advance. We're going to do this all together. Colors today are phthalo blue, ochre, green, and raw sienna. If you don't have raw sienna, you can make raw sienna by red, ochre, and brown mixed together makes raw sienna, or something very similar or close. So let's just put anything that's bothering us in the parking lot just for the period of this hour. And we'll just take some deep breaths in. And then as you take that breath and release it, just drop your shoulders down. And we'll do that 3 times. So deep breath in, hold it at the top, and then just release. So we'll do that 3 times. So deep breath in and hold it and release. Drop those shoulders, and another deep breath in and hold it and release. And one more time, deep breath in and hold it at the top and release. And that moment or period of time where you're holding your breath, it's a bit of a meditative state where we get into the time of now, which is difficult to have it all day long every day. So if you're able to take a few deep breaths throughout the day and just calm yourself, then that might help. We are going to do some masking fluid. So masking fluid is a liquid. If you do not have this liquid, then you can use masking tape. Failing that, if you have paint resist like a crayon or a piece of wax, then you could put some markings on. But when you put wax on a canvas or your paper, it's difficult to paint over it. So better if you try it with tape. And I'll paint both. I'll paint with the paint resist on this canvas, and I'll paint with the paint resist with the masking tape, so we'll be able to see the difference when we take the tape off and when we take the masking fluid off. We're masking the white waves. So I'm going to change my masking fluid, which is white. I'm going to change it to a color. I'm going to make it red so it's visible to all of you. I'm not asking you to make yours red, but I'm making mine red so that you'll be able to see where to put it. So let me just change my color. I'm just adding a little bit of color to my masking fluid and making it red. And so we're going to start with our waves. Now I've made my masking fluid, for those that are just on, I've made my masking fluid a color so that I can see where it's going on. I'm not asking you to make yours a color, but I'm doing this to mine just so you can see where it goes. Okay, so with our masking fluid, I'm going to start, and I'm using my toothpick. Okay, so I'm going to start to make some little lines at the top of my canvas with my toothpick. So you can see they're very small and very fine, and they don't all have to be perfect. But I've only made mine red so you can see where it's going. Yours can stay white. So I'm just making some fine lines, and I'm going to leave this and let it dry. You're better with the white crayon. Actually move my canvas down so you can see it better. So we're just starting with some fine waves in the background, and we're going to start. There is a horizon line. It's 4 inches down from the top, that horizon line. So we're going below the horizon line. And if you don't have a crayon, then it's okay to use tape. So I'll come back and show you my tape in a moment. But for now, I'm just putting on this paint resist just to show some waves. And they're getting bigger as I get closer to the shore. So they're more narrow in the back and wider in the front. And when I come to my shore, I want a really good coverage. I want about 1/2 inch all along the shoreline. If there are gaps in there, that's okay. But I want this all along my shoreline, even to the far side, all along. And it's a little tricky with a toothpick. But if I use my toothpick on a sideways angle, and I've only added that color in there just so you can see where I'm actually putting it on. So sometimes you can buy paint resist or Frisket in a blue color, and that way you can see where you put it on. I think it comes in more than a blue, but then you can actually see where you put it on. I've just added a bit of watercolor so that I can see where it's going. So, and I'm hoping that that color doesn't come through on my canvas after, because I've just mixed that color in. So once that dries, I should be able to peel that off when I'm finished painting. So there, I've got a nice coverage for my shore. If you don't have paint resist, you can use masking tape and put on the masking tape just in the shape of waves. And I just ripped up painter's tape and just put it on. And I will paint this as well, so we'll see how this does. So this is my shoreline down here. This is where my horizon is. So on the original, on this one, it's 4 inches from the horizon line up is the sky. So we're leaving that without any color for now. you want to know that it's on there. It doesn't have to be super thick. It just depends. These are fairly light waves. You could put it thicker when you get closer to the shore. Because it's a gum, it will come off when you're done. I would go medium, not super thick, but not ultra thin. If this is your first time using paint resist, remember it's your first time using paint resist, and that's okay. And if your paint resist, you put it on, or your tape is too thick or thicker than you like, so a couple of these on my the tape that I put on, they look like really heavy waves. Now, they don't have to, once I'm done and I take that tape off, or even when I take that paint resist off, if my waves are wider than I like, or longer than I like, I still have the option to paint blue over it. The process we're going to go through is we're putting on the wax resist now, so that by the time we get to that, that's going to be dry. We're going to do the sky, giving more time for that to dry. Then we're going to paint the water and let that dry, and then we'll move on to the earth down below. So we have lots of time to let that dry and the paint around it to dry. And so I'm just giving another minute for people to finish that, and then we'll go on to the sky. So we're going to do this in 3 parts. We'll do sky, then we'll do water, and then we'll do the earth below. And then we'll be able to take that masking fluid off and see those waves pop out like magic. So if you're ready, we're going to use phthalo blue. That's the same color in the sky as is in the water. The water's a more concentrated phthalo blue. You can see that. The top part is dark blue, and then it fades as it moves down. So we're only going to paint clear water to the horizon line. From the horizon line about 1 inch or so up, we're going to use paper towel, and we're going to just clear that out. So it might have a little bit of a blue haze in a few spots, but it's going to make a definite observable difference between the sky and the water. So let's go ahead and we'll get our sky wet, and we're only going to the horizon line, straight across, just clear water, not a lot of water. We don't want it to be dripping down into the ocean. We just want to we want to prime our canvas so that when we put the phthalo blue on, it starts to run. So we're just getting the canvas wet just to the horizon line, and only with clear water. And you can look from an angle and just see if there's any spots that you've missed. They'll look dry. So just give them a tap of water. And just take your time. Remember, this is just a piece of paper. This is practice. When you're ready to make bigger canvases and bigger skies, bigger oceans, more waves, this is just practice to do that. And then I'm going to put my phthalo blue on. If you have cobalt blue, if you need to use aquamarine blue because that's what you have, or if you just have blue, whatever, you don't know what blue it is, go ahead and put it on. So whatever blue you have, you're putting the same color on the sky and the ocean, but the top of the sky is dark. So I'm popping that color on there. You can see that's quite dark. And because I've wet my canvas, it's going to start to run. And I'm going to assist that a little bit and let that run down into the rest, but I want it darkest at the top. So I might add a little bit more because I want it darkest at the top, and I know it's going to blend. So I'm not so worried about painting all the way to the bottom. If it's white down there or some of that blue has run, that's okay. I just want to have that clearer at the bottom than the top. And then I'm going to use a paper towel. So I'm taking a paper towel. So I'm just going to move that down just a little bit more, about halfway. Let that run. And then I'm going to take a paper towel and I'm going to do some rounded swirls. So I've got the look of some clouds in there. Now, if it's taken away too much and I want to put a little bit more back in there, I can touch a little bit more back on. And I can, while it's still wet, I can do that again. I'm using a dry paper towel. And it's just lifting off and moving a little bit of that paint. And I'm going to go back in just with a little extra color and just give a few more swirls of my paper towel. And maybe it's damp now because I've been using it, but I just want a few more little swirls of clouds. And it doesn't have to be even. It doesn't have to be straight clouds across. Maybe I want some little, some darker spots up above. So still using the same paper towel. I'm just playing with the sky. Now I've got a nice dimension. I've got some lighter and some darker. And now that my sky is on there, if I want to, I can still go in and I can add a little bit darker just here and there. Just to give a little bit of drama to my sky. And this is your sky, so whatever it ends up. And we're just about half time, so I'll just read the card, our affirmation card for today. So we have to look upon the environment with optimism. The pessimism is within us. That's from Sridhar Maharaja. Think of an issue in your life you felt negatively about recently and apply this lens. My challenges are my greatest teachers. I use them to learn about myself and to live more consciously and authentically. We have to look upon the environment with optimism. The pessimism is within us, from Sridhar Maharaja. So think of an issue in your life you felt negatively about recently and apply this lens to change it, to think with optimism. My challenges are my greatest teachers. I use them to learn about myself and to live more consciously and authentically. And while we have that on our mind, let's think more positive and optimism, and we'll give hope for the people that are oppressed in times of great troubles and worry that are having impact in different parts of the world globally. We'll just give a moment to think and pray for those people, for our support, whatever we could do, and just think kindly for them with optimism. So now that we have our sky done, we're going to get our water wet. What we're going to do is paint our water. So actually, let me get my sky done on my other painting. I forget I'm doing this two of them. So this is my sky with the masking tape. So I'm just going to use my paper towel, just go through and just make some clouds. Just here and there. So a little bit of blue down below, that's okay. Got my clouds, some are a little bit darker, some have a nice little ring on them, that's okay, that's good. There's my clouds. So now we'll go ahead and with water, I'm going right down just to the shoreline. So not below the shoreline. So we're not doing the earth below, the grass and the sand. We're just doing right to the edge. Where the sand would be and where the ground is. So we're just painting that in clear water. And if any's gone down below, if you've drizzled any, then you can just tap that off. We're just going to the shoreline just with clear water. So we don't want it sopping wet. We just want to have a little bit of water on there just to prime the canvas so it's ready to receive the paint. And then whatever blue you've used, if you've used cobalt, if you've used cerulean or passion blue or aquamarine, it doesn't matter. The same color as your sky, we're going to put that across the horizon line. This is a full color. So now it looks like mine is running into my sky because it wasn't quite dry. So I'm just going to use a paper towel and just tap off that excess that's gone into my sky. I just want to keep my horizon line as clean, straight across as I can. And then I'm going to continue with that blue going right over that paint resist. And as I get near the shoreline, I want it to be the lightest. So if it's darker, I'm just going to use a bit of paper towel just to absorb the excess, because I do want it to be lighter near the shoreline. So we're just painting right over top of that paint resist. And it will feel a little bit rubbery when you're painting over it. That's okay. And anywhere near the shoreline, I'm going to use my paper towel and just lighten that up just by pressing and lifting off. And it doesn't have to be a straight line. I'm just lifting off just so that it's lighter near the shore. And I'm going to do the same on my tape, my masking tape demonstration, coming right across the water. So this is my picture with tape. It's a little bit darker on the one side than the other, but that's okay. I'm not worried about that. If I want to, I can hold that and let that move a little bit. And I've used my paper towel by the shoreline just to lighten that up a little bit. So this is just with masking tape or painter's tape. And just ripped into different shapes. And if something happens when I'm done with this and I'm want those lines to be lighter or darker with the waves, then I can paint over them. So then, because I want to leave this alone to dry, I'm going to move down to my shore now. So moving down to the shore, I'm going to paint my shoreline, all of it. I'm going to paint it ochre. I know I have lines that I have drawn in there for the shore, for where the grasses are going to go, but I'm going to paint right over those for a nice base to start with. And I'm using ochre, and I'm using wet on dry. So it's a nice, fresh ochre color. Right up to that sandy shore at the side. And if it's not completely even, where it's lighter or darker in some places, or if for whatever reason you have a little bit of paint resist that's spilled in there, in my case, I have a little one at the front. You can see I've got a little bit there that's popped in there. That's okay. Sometimes when waves come onto the shore, they leave a little bit of those bubbles. So on my masking tape, I have water, sky, and now with my ochre, I'm going to paint the shore. And if you've got those lines where you've got the grass that has grown is in there, then that's okay to go right over that. And again, this is wet on dry. And you can see it's not completely even. There's some lighter and darker spots, and that's okay. I'm going to switch to a zero brush, and I didn't mention that we would be using black, but I think we'll use a black just for those seagulls in the sky. So let's put those seagulls in. So there are 3 of them, only because I like to do uneven numbers. It just makes the eye linger a little longer. So just with black and a zero brush, I'm just going to go ahead and put those seagulls in, and I'm going to take advantage of the white space that I've got. So I'm going to put my bird, the first one, where there's a white space. And they never all fly in the same direction, so I'm going to take another lighter space up the top here and see if I can give that just a little bit different dimension. Not sure if that looks any different, but and way over in the distance, just a little bit smaller near that white space, I'm going to put a 3rd bird. Actually doesn't look any smaller. I'm going to make my other ones just a little bit bigger. And also on my masking tape, I've also put the birds. I'm just taking advantage of that lighter area, the whiter sky. And then we'll move down and we'll start to work on our grassy areas at the side. And I can still see through my ochre that I painted that I have some lines here. So I can still see my lines that I put in there. And I'm going to use green. I'm going to use sap green. If you don't have sap green, you have hooker's green, that's okay. If you don't have either, you've got just a medium green or a dark green. We're just looking for a green coverage, just a little bit, just on the outer edges. So you're just outlining your outer edges. And I'll do the same. So it just creates an opening into the water. And now I want to go ahead and I want to start to create some grasses in that area. So I'm using a number 3 brush because I want my initial grasses to be a little bit thicker. And I'm just starting, it doesn't even have to be at the very bottom. Somewhere within that line, and even going above the line, I'm just putting a little bit of slashes of grass, some higher and some lower, which indicates that some are closer and some are farther away. This is sap green. So in some, if they're closer, they won't go quite as high. If they're farther away, they'll extend up onto your sand visibly. Now that I've got that on, I'm switching to a smaller brush, a number 2. I was using a number 3. They were a little bit thicker, a little bit heavier. Now I'm switching to a number 2, and I'm just going to put some raw sienna, just a little bit of grasses in and around, just to mix in with the existing color. I still want that sand to be showing, but I can start to cover over that top line. So it's okay that the grass of the green is showing at the bottom, but I'm going to start with this color just to kind of cover over my top line. But it gave me a good base for where I wanted to paint. So, and I think we need to remember the grasses don't always grow straight. They grow on angles, they go over top of each other, they bend sometimes in the middle. And while some of that is still wet, I'm going to go back to my ochre color, and I'm going to do a few little colors, slashes of ochre in between on top. Just softens everything. That ochre, because your other color dried lighter, if you put fresh ochre on top. So if I take this fresh ochre and put it up here in this part of the shore or this part of the sand and do a little fresh, little sprig of grass there, it's the same color ochre, but the other ochre has dried lighter. So we can play with color on color. So have some fun with it and don't have a whole lot of expectations about how it's going to end up. It's just learning something new, trying something different. If while you're doing this, some of your green has disappeared and you want to recover that, it's okay to put a few extra on top. So if I'm working with my masking tape one, I've just put some green slashes on there for grasses. I'm going to add some of the raw sienna on top, starting to cover over that top line. Remembering that grasses grows all different directions. I can put a few little sprigs up here, a little bit down here if I like. And over to the other side, adding more of the burnt sienna. and on top of that, fresh ochre. You can take a little bit of that raw sienna if you like and just create some little grasses just in the foreground, just little pebbles. And you can, if you cover over and only have the sand showing, if you take a little puddle of raw sienna and your brush, you can make some flicks on the sand. Just give that look, just a little bit of pebbles in the sand, if you like. That's up to you. And then when you take it off, you don't have any in the water. So if I do the same thing on this canvas down below, I'm covering over my water with a piece of paper towel, just getting some fresh raw sienna and just tapping my brush. And so none of that has gone in the water. But it's got some sand or pebbles leading up to the water's edge. Let's see what happens when I take off the tape. Oops. I could get an edge. There we go. I'm very carefully removing my tape, and it's exposing really white lines in the water. Really, in that case, I've got a really square line. I'm going to continue to take off the tape, take off all the little pieces. So I've got the signs of some waves. Some aren't quite as nice looking as I would like, and that's okay. This is a starting point for my waves and my shoreline. I've got a nice white shoreline of frothy water coming up from the waves. So from here, I will go ahead and I will adjust my waves. So I'm not working with the paint with the paint resist. I'm only working with the masking tape right now. So this is a little bit more squared off than I want this wave. I'd like it to be a little bit more choppy looking. So you can see just by adding a little bit of paint, I've changed what that wave looks like. So I don't want a square edge on the bottom, so I can put a dark edge at around the edge, make it a little bit darker. Same with this little wave. I want it to be, you know, just a little bit frothy looking. I can add a few little dots here and there throughout the other wave, so we can change up what we've got. But in order to be able to have that nice crisp white, we had to put that paint resist on first. Even this wave, I can split it if I want. It doesn't have to be just one. That's taken off the tape, and you can see if I don't like the edges that I've got, this one looks a little bit triangular, so I might want to just stretch that out a little bit. So now I've got some nice, and if it's too dark, I can always lighten it up just by adding a little bit of water on my brush and spreading or thinning that out. That's how I can change what I've got. So that's the one with masking tape. So that's how that turned out. And actually it's got a funny little ridge at the top where I had tape. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to finish that horizon right across to the top. So then I've got a nice wave up there. So let's work with our masking fluid or paint resist, and we'll start to take that off. If you have wax crayon and you have some little beading, if you take a damp paper towel and touch on wherever you have that beading on top of the wax, it should lift that extra color off. And so now I'm going to start with my paint resist. Now I'm going to use my finger just to wipe that off. It should be like slappy hand or that sticky stuff. If that's not working, I can use an eraser. Very gently, I can use an eraser and start to take off that sticky. But there's my paint resist coming off, and I had colored that pink ahead of time, or red, so you could see it, and it hasn't picked up any of that red color. When you run your hand over that, you'll be able to feel it, and it should just peel off. But gently, go at it gently. And if you find you're starting to get a blue color on your hands, just dip them in your water and onto the paper towel. So you're starting with clean hands, clean fingers, because that blue will start to pull into your color. So just go ahead and gently rub that off. And you should end up with some really pretty waves on there. Just taking that off. So see, we got some magic happening here. So just start to take that off. And when we're finished taking that off, that's when we can do adjustments if we don't like the shapes that we've got. So just keep working at it. You'll feel it on there. So just rub a little, just very gently. And you might find you don't need to or don't want to make any adjustments to what has occurred. But it's just like magic. There you go. So that's the two. So that's using tape, just with a tape technique, and adjusting because the tape wasn't completely fine lined as with a toothpick, and this is without. So I'm not going to do any more adjustments on that. I'm quite happy with the way that is. I think that looks quite pretty. I hope you're happy with yours. And if you're not, you've got the technique now. You've done it. You've seen it. You've tried it. You'll be able to repeat this process and do it differently the next time. And each time you do it will be different. Remember that when you put paint on paint, once the original paint is dry, it has dried lighter. So when you put the same color on for a second coating, you'll get a darker color. I didn't make my phthalo blue into another color. That's the same phthalo blue. It's just because it's a second coat, it's given a darker color. Now you can try both. And if it didn't turn out exactly the way you want with the masking fluid, don't give up on the masking fluid. Maybe go a little thicker next time. And maybe make your waves a little darker. So this is the masking fluid, and these are my waves. And if I want to make any of these different shapes, then I can go back in with phthalo blue. And it doesn't have to be completely dark. It doesn't have to be really dark. But I can go back in and I can change this wave to be, I wouldn't want it this dark near the shore. But I can put even some dots here just to make that look like it's a curl of a wave. We can do lots of things after the fact, but in order to have that fresh wave look, you really need to have some kind of paint resist in the beginning. So even if I put that under this little curl of a wave here, just under that curl, just spread it out a little bit. then that gives just a little bit more deeper dimension to that wave. And if you wanted to, like I said, you can put some little dots just to indicate that there's a little bit of curl to that wave and a little bit of splashing. So play with it, try different things, but there's an example of one type of wave. So if something happens like that, and sometimes you feel like, oh my gosh, this is a complete disaster. Now I don't even have waves, and I wanted to have waves. All I've got is this big blue patch. You know, like I've been there and got frustrated. So if I look at this is my masking tape, and I didn't get a wave because it didn't come off, I can create a wave with white paint. So now I'm painting a wave in there. That's a wave I just put in the center, just with waves. So you can create your own with white paint, just so that's the one in the center. It's a little bit lighter because it's not the white left in the background, but it is a white wave, or the top of a wave, right? So you can still, your painting is salvageable. So what's left to do? That's what you can do in 1 hour and 5 minutes. What's left to do is our artist signature. So you'll need to decide where are you going to put your signature. And I think I'm going to use Phthalo blue, and I'm going to sign right down here in the corner in